Okay, so I'm always practicing finding a better mood, just what we all talked about. But when I think about something that's bigger, that I really want, that's big to me, for example, acting, I really want to do acting, but I've been here in LA for 15 years, small roles here and there. So whenever I think about where I want to be, I think positively about it. But there's always something in the back of my mind that says,
do you know how everyone creates? We've said a lot of words here today, but I'm going to give you a really simple statement. Everybody's creating their own reality, but you know what the factor is in the reality that you're creating? Your expectation. What you just said to us is, I have a desire, but my expectation is not up to speed with my desire. Then that begs the next question. Well, where are you getting your expectation? Well, I'm basing it on what I've been observing. And what I'm observing isn't what I want, but I've observed it so much that it's my expectation. So that suggests that you want to look someplace else. Jerry and Esther have a dear friend. She's a psychologist, a coach, a counselor, a really good one. And she lives on the East Coast. She's mostly retired now, but years ago when Esther had more time and they were allowing telephone conversations through Esther with others. And this woman called on a regular basis. And sometimes she would talk about something that was happening with someone that she was wanting to help. One of her clients who was a particularly stubborn case. And so she would want our point of view on what was the path of least resistance to help them find a breakthrough. And she discovered through one of our processes that if she would write a story, like a script, of their experience, so that it took a dominant place in her vibration, so that she believed the story she was writing about them more than the story that they were telling her, that as she hooked in with her inner being's point of view, she had more power of influence. And then in her conversations with them, she could bring them into expecting better things for themselves. So, for example, she has a son who is a magnificent cabinet maker who didn't have any business or not enough. And his cabinets were the best, and people that had them really appreciated them, but he didn't have enough business. And so his mother, who had been listening to him complaining about not having enough business for many years, his business was 10 years old, heard us one day saying, you cannot let your expectation about his business be based upon what's been going on or even what is going on, because there's a vibrational version of it that we'd like to tell you. So we told her the vibrational version. We told her what he had created, that his suffering had created more business, and that his belief that there was only one of him had created more tools. And a lot of things had changed in his vibrational business that he had not let change in his physical reality. So his expectation was stuck in a place that wasn't serving him, but his inner being's expectation was a whole other story. So we told her that story, and then she began writing that story. She wrote it down. She didn't use her computer. She wrote it longhand every day. She wrote for a few minutes about that new story. And it was less than 1 week before his telephone started ringing. Now, why is that? What is this power of influence? In this case, we're talking about a mother having positive influence when she changed her expectation about her son. Can you imagine the power that you have when you change your expectation about yourself? Can you imagine if you could tell the story that your inner being knows until you own it, until it's your story? Your expectation is your point of attraction. And you can tell by the way you feel whether you're in sync with the story that your inner being is telling or at odds with it on every subject. So you want to ask your inner being for their story, for their version of you as an actor, if you still care about that, because your inner being has a story to tell. And if you believe that your inner being exists, and you believe that your inner being has a perspective, and you're willing to listen to the expectation, listen to the story that your inner being tells you, and you're willing to practice it until it's the dominant vibration within you, then what you're outputting will be in sync with what your inner being is outputting, and what comes to you will reflect the change in your expectation. We used to talk about bridging beliefs, but it's a more powerful word. Change your expectation. Practice an expectation that pleases you. So when you think about it, think about anybody that you know. What's your expectation? Well, Jerry used to say, Abraham, I swear, I did not expect negative things from that person until they showed them to me. And after they showed them to me, then yeah, I'll admit, I started to expect it. And we always said, whoa, 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 whoa. There was an expectation before the expectation, before the expectation, before the expectation. And we don't want to go back to all of that. There's not enough lifetime for any of you to do that. Just know that if things aren't working out for you the way you want them to, it's because you've got an expectation that's in the way that you've got to change. And what's an expectation? An expectation is a belief. It's a thought that you continue to think. So you got to think some different thoughts. It could not be a simpler thing. But then you say, how can I think a thought that's different than the reality that I'm watching? And we say, you've got to accept that there is another reality, and you've got to accept that there's a part of you, a big part of you, a dominant part of you that's looking at that other reality, and you've got to tune into that part of you, which means you got to catch it early, and you got to practice it early in the day, and you got to notice it when you deviate from it, and when you find yourself not believing it, then you got to distract yourself from it. Don't hit it head on. The worst time in the world to try to change an expectation is when the world is proving to you that your expectation is right. When work isn't coming, that's not the time to practice a new expectation. You're just going to practice the expectation that doesn't serve you. But if you feel frisky, or your mind is quiet, or you feel peaceful, or you've been meditating, you got to find some way to tune into the expectation that your inner being has for you. We know you heard all of that. So now what?
I know there's a period of time before physical manifestation happens, right? This gestation period. So how do I know if I'm doing things correctly?
Feel
and
good.
Just taking, okay.
It's not a matter of doing them correctly, because you can't get it wrong. And your inner being is not ever going to say to you, whoa, 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 you're doing that wrong. But when you say, I want this and I'm getting this, then we say, there is something going on with your expectation. You've got to move that expectation to another place. And as humans, you cry out in unison, how can we expect something that's different than what we see? And we say, you got to figure that out. You got to figure that out. It's different in every case. Turn off the television. That'll help. That'll help a lot. Because there are a lot of people that are wanting to show you what is. Well, what is pretty obvious. Where are you going? That'd be like you're out on the road and you've decided that you're going to do a live broadcast to anyone who wants to watch you about your journey. And what you keep saying over and over again is, here I am, there's asphalt and white lines. There's asphalt and white lines. There's asphalt and white lines. There's asphalt and white lines here. I'm so glad that you're all tuned into my broadcast. And here there's asphalt and white lines and 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 asphalt. And the white lines are further apart now than they were. Oh no, I just slowed down. Now we know this sounds ridiculous, but it's sort of the way you broadcast to yourself, even if you're not saying it out loud to others. You're so wanting to look right where you are instead of look up where you're going. And talk about what's happening, how you're feeling. In other words, there's so much more that you could talk about than the reality of some of the things that haven't quite broken loose. We've been spending a lot of time with a lot of you over a lot of years, writing a lot of books about a lot of processes that you could do to change your perspective. But before anyone does that, you have to decide that it's worth changing your perspective. And so what we're asking of you right here and now is that you just acknowledge, I have expectations that do not serve me. Esther heard herself the other day explaining to a contractor about something else, just like the problem she's got now that she's lived. Yeah, it's happened to me before, she said. Wasn't fun then either. And as she heard herself telling the story, she thought, wow, I got myself locked in right where I stand. Can't move from this spot. I had the expectation before I got here, and now I've got the same thing happening again. I'm remembering. And so now I'm trying to explain. I'm trying to control through fear. No, Esther doesn't control through fear. There's this really nice man who's the contractor, newly assigned to her house. And he was explaining to her what the remedy was going to be, which is a little disruptive to Esther's experience. And Esther felt the disruption, didn't like it, and decided to let him know that she was feeling the disruption. So she looked sad. Gee, that's going to be really hard for me. And then she looked up. It was a life-altering moment for her. And she saw this beautiful man who wants nothing more than to please Esther, realizing he wasn't pleasing her. And he looked so sad. And Esther thought, damn it. That's the last thing in this world that I ever want to do. I do not want to control you by making you think that I'm sad and a victim and vulnerable. I only want to control through love. I only want to control through love. And so she snapped right out of it. She snapped out of it in that moment, and she said, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. And I know you guys are going to figure this out. And in our family, we have a saying, like the one-armed alligator wrangler, we learn as we go. Immediately, all she wanted was to let him off the hook. She wanted to guide. She wanted to control her experience with him through love and honoring him and acknowledging his value. She didn't want to bring diminishment to him by flashing her own diminishment to him. You see what we're getting at? Whew, it's so big, isn't it? It's so big.